On Daf Samach Zayin Amud Aleph. Right? Rav Chisda v'Rav Sheishes. About 10 lines into the Amud. Rav Chisda v'Rav Sheishes, Ki Pagi Ba'adodi, when they would meet each other. So Rav Chisda, Marsan Sevosei, Mimasnaise de Rav Sheishes. Rav Chisda, his lips were trembling from the Bekiyas, from the Rav Sheishes that knew all the Mishnayos and Braises with such a Bekiyas. He was afraid of Rav Sheishes to ask him any questions that he won't be able to answer. On the other hand, Rav Sheishes, Marsa Kula Gufe Mipulpula de Rav Chisda. Rav Sheishes, his entire body was trembling from the pulpul of Rav Chisda, all the questions and the pulpulim that he would say. Okay, this is an introduction for a question that Rav Chisda asked Rav Sheishes. Interesting. I don't think this is the only time in Shas where you find that Rav Chisda asked Rav Sheishes a question, but the Gemara gives this introduction. And the interesting thing is, it says that Rav Chisda was afraid of Rav Sheishes, only his lips were trembling. Rav Sheishes was afraid of Rav Chisda, his entire body was trembling. So over here it looks like that someone that is not necessarily such a big bucky, but he has a koyach to be mefalpul, that's something to be more afraid of. The questions that he could ask will get you so confused. Someone is a bucky, he'll ask you a stira from one mishnah to another, but he's not asking with such a koyach hapilpul, wasn't so afraid. But kule gufe, the koyach hapilpul of Rav Chisda, his whole body was trembling. So now, boy minei Rav Chisda Rav Sheishes. Rav Chisda asked a question from Rav Sheishes. Shnei batim mishnei tzidei Rishus Harabim. What happens if you have two houses that are on two opposite sides of Rishus Harabim? So, just to remind you what we're talking about over here, this sugya talks about the concept of bittul rishus. Okay, we've learned a lot about bittul rishus till now, and we're going to learn again about bittul rishus. Okay, so you have two houses on two different sides of Rishus Harabim. So, could the people of one house make an eruv with the people on the other house on the other opposite side of the Rishus Harabim? Of course not. The whole concept of making an eruv is an eruv chatzeris. Could the people of one house be mevatel the use of their house or of their anything to the people on the other side of the street? No, of course not. But what happened now? In the middle of Shabbos, Goyim came up and put up a fence, a mechitza now, that blocks off the Rishus Harabim, and now these two houses share a courtyard in between them. Okay, so we already had a few times before that any mechitza put up on Shabbos, in the middle of Shabbos, is considered to be a mechitza. So now the question is, mahu? What's the halacha? So it's too late to make an eruv chatzeris. An eruv chatzeris has to be done before Shabbos. But the question now is, if they want to be able to carry within this new chatzer that was formed on Shabbos, could one of them be mevatel his use of this chatzer? So now the other house across the street will be able to use it. Could you do bittul rishus on Shabbos itself? Sagt the Gemara, according to the opinion that we learned before that says, this is Shmuel, according to Rave, ein bittul rishus mechatzer lechatzer. There is no such a thing of bittul rishus from one chatzer to another chatzer. Leiti boilach. There's no question. Hashtadi boila Eiruvin me esmail matzim arvi. If in a case when you have two chatzeres that are side by side to each other, and if they want to make an eruv together, they could. Matzamar, they can make an eruv together. Amrit, nevertheless, this opinion holds. Ein bittul rishus michatzer lachatzer. The takon of Chazal of bittul rishus does not work from one chatzer to another chatzer. Hacha. Over here, when you have two houses on opposite sides of a street of Rishus Harabim, the boy Eiruvin esmol, if they wanted to make an eruv yesterday, le matzimar, they couldn't. There was a Rishus Harabim in between. So like Kol Sheken, for sure that bittul rishus will not work for these two houses, even though now there's a chatzer in between.
Who owns the
That's not a question. Huh?
Who owns the Rishus Harabim area?
Before
that just became Rishus Yachid.
Who owns it? Now it's their use. Both of these people. Well, if the gates are put up, not sure how they did it. How they have to get rishus from the people of the Rishus Harabim to do this, blocking off the street basically. But it's owned by these two houses. So it's a joint ownership. That's the issue. You can't carry from a house to a chatzah that has a joint ownership. So the question is if one of them can be mevatel his ownership. So that's not for sure. According to this opinion, you can't do this on Shabbos. Ki tebayalach. The question is aliba demanda amar yesh bittul rishus mechatzer lachatzer. The opinion that says that you could be mevatel your rishus to another chatzer. So because they can make an eruv together, so the bittul rishus also works together. So the question is whether I could extend that concept and apply it here as well. Hasan, the boy Eiruvin Masmoil, in the case of two chatzeres side by side, had they wanted to make an Erev together, Matzah Marvi, they could make an Erev together. So then, therefore, Betul Nami Matzah Mevatel. So there, the concept of Bittul Rishos also works. But maybe here I should say that since they can't make an Erev from yesterday, Betul Nami Matzah Mevatel. So therefore, the concept of Bittul Rishos doesn't work either. Or perhaps I can say, Loishna, it doesn't matter. Even though they couldn't make an Erev Chatzeris together, but the fact is now they asser on each other. Now there's one Chatzer between them, and therefore it's a shared space. So therefore maybe Bittul Rishus does work over here. Amalei, so Rav Chisda answered, or Rav Sheshes actually answered, Ein Mevatlin. No, you can't do Bittul Rishus in this case. You have to have at least the ability to make an Erev Chatzeris before Shabbos, and then you can do Bittul Rishus as well. Otherwise, you can't. Another case, another Shaila he asked him. That's what I understand here in the Gemara, that this is another Shaila that Rav Chisda asked Rav Sheshes. Meis Nachri b'Shabbos Mahu. What happens if you have a goy that died on Shabbos? Now this is really a continuation from what we learned in the end of Daf Samach Hey. There it spoke about a case where Yidden were living together, and then a goy arrives on Shabbos. In the middle of Shabbos, a goy comes and ruins the Erev Chatzeris. Over here we're talking about an opposite case. They were living together with a goy. They couldn't make an Erev Chatzeris before Shabbos because of the goy that was there. But then on Shabbos, the goy dies. What's the halacha now? So now that the goy is not here, while the goy is there, you can't make an Erev Chatzeris and you can't do Bittul Rishus either. You have to rent from the goy. But now that the goy is not here, the question is, in the middle of Shabbos, could they do Bittul Rishus? So the Gemara explains, according to the opinion that we had before in a case where the guy arrived on Shabbos, and what did that mandama say? If the guy arrives in the middle of Shabbos, you could rent from the guy his space of ownership, and you could also do Bittul Rishus. You could do both, even in the middle of Shabbos. So then for sure, in the case where the guy dies, it's not a problem, not a question. And the Gemara explains, if you're saying in a case when the guy arrives, so you could do two things. You could rent from the guy his space, and you could also do Bittul Rishus in the middle of Shabbos. So in a case where the guy dies, and now all you have to do is Bittul Rishus, for sure you can do that at Shabbos. According to who is our question, according to the opinion that we had before that said, which I think it was Shmuel, that said, Ein Seichen. You can't rent from a guy in the middle of Shabbos. So the question is, and then in that case, you're going to do both things. You're going to do Seichrin and Bittul Rishus. You can't do both of those things together in the middle of Shabbos. Should I say that it's only both of the things that you can't do in the middle of Shabbos? But if the guy dies and now all you need is Bittul Rishus, that could be done in the middle of Shabbos. Or maybe there's no difference. Maybe if you can't do Schiras Rishus from the guy and Bittul, you can't do Bittul Rishus alone on Shabbos either. So the answer over here is Machlaikis. Rav Sheshes says that, or maybe Rav Chisda. Who's this over here? Rav Sheshes, right? Rav Sheshes says Mevatlin, that you could do Bittul Rishus alone on Shabbos. Amnuna says in this case, when the guy dies on Shabbos, Ein Mevatlin. You can't do Bittul Rishus on Shabbos. Amar Rav Yudah Mashmuel. So now the Gemara is going to discuss this case of a guy that's there living with Yidden. So usually a guy living with Yidden, you can't make an Erev Chatzeris. But now the Gemara says, Nachri sheyesh le Pesach arba pasuach lebika. So you have a Chatzer, and there's houses that are open up all into the Chatzer, or into one Mavoi. But then the guy that's living with them, so to their mazel, this guy also has a back door that goes out into a valley. He doesn't have to go out through the regular exit, through the Mavi that he's sharing together with you. He has another exit to go out in the back, into the Bika. So then, it's the guy does not disturb their Erev Chatzeris. Even if he does use the mavoi to bring in camels and caravans or big wagons, so he is using the mavoi together with the Yidden, it doesn't matter. Ein Eiser al Bnei Mavoi. The fact that he's there, he doesn't aser on the people of the mavoi, he has his own exit to go out through the back. He's comfortable to use that. It's a very comfortable exit, so it's as if he's living separately. My time bepische de miyachadlei bahu nichelei. That exit that he has for himself, going out in the back, he's very comfortable using that, and therefore it's as if he's living separately. So now based on this, the question was asked. So here we were talking about that he has a very comfortable exit. It goes out into an open valley. It's very easy for him to go out. So now the Shaila was asked, Pasuach lekarfif. How about if this guy has an opening, it doesn't go out into the valley, it goes out into a karfif. A karfif is an area that's usually used, that we had already before many times, a karfif. It's usually an area outside a city, a storage area. They would store wood there, they would store there. It's not such an open area. It's not such a comfortable exit for the guy to go out. Mahu, what's the halacha? If he has this opening, is he separate from the Yidden that are living in this chutzner? He said it in the name of Ulfane. Rashi says Ulfane is not the name of a person. Ulfane means it's a tradition. Sheshama mirabbai v'rabbai mirabbai. So he said that he heard a tradition about the shaila, afilu pasuach lekarfif. Even if the guy has an opening in the back, it's not as comfortable as opening into a valley, but it's open into the storage area of a karfif. That's good enough. He has a separate opening, and his presence amongst the Yidden does not ask the Yidden to make an Eruv Chatzeres. Rabbi and Rav Yosef Damri Tarvayu, Rabbi and Rav Yosef both say that it depends. Nochri, when it comes to a guy that has a separate opening, Beis Asayim, if this karfif is only as large as a Beis Asayim, then Eiser, the presence of the Nochri amongst the Yidden will aser, because it's a small area. It's not so comfortable for the guy to go out there. He uses his main exit in the Mavi where the Yidden live. If this karfif is large enough that it's more than a Beis Asayim, so then it's more easier for the guy to go out. So then he doesn't ask, he's not together, he's not considered to be together with the Yid. But now he says, how about the same thing b'negei to a Yid that's living in this Mavi? You have a Yid that's living in this Mavi together with other Yidden, and he forgot to join the Eruv Chatzeres, but he has a separate exit that goes out in the back to a karfif. So over here, the halacha is going to be the opposite. Yosemi Beis Asayim. Again, let's skip something. Beis Asayim. If it's only a Beis Asayim, so then Eina Iser. So then he doesn't aser. Why? So this goes back to the halacha that we learned many times before. A karfif is basically a Reshus HaYachid. It's surrounded with a fence. But it depends. If it's only a Beis Asayim, then it taka has the halacha like a Reshus HaYachid. You can carry there. If it's more than a Beis Asayim, it's very large, and it wasn't made for dira. It's not made for anybody to live there. It's just a storage area for wood, lamashal. So then you can't carry there. Chacham Wagaize, it looks like a Reshus HaRabim. It's very large. You can't carry there. So therefore, if it's a Beis Asayim, so then on Shabbos, this is an exit that the Yid could carry out over there. So therefore, Eina Iser. He does not aser on the fact that he's together with the Yidden in the Mavet, because he has an area in the back that he could carry out to. So the fact that he has a comfortable place that he can go out in the back. Yosem Beis Asayim, but if the area in the back is more than a Beis Asayim, Iser. Because on Shabbos he can't use this place, he can't carry out over there. So therefore he's part of the Yidden inside the Chatzar or the Mavayir, and therefore if he didn't make an Eruv Chatzeres, he's going to aser on everyone else. So now the Gemara brings again the same shaila that we had before about a goy that has his opening into a karfif just in the name of another Amayra. Rava bar Chakloi asked the same shaila from Rav Huna. Pasuach lekarfif mao, a goy that's living amongst them and he has his own opening into a karfif. What's the halacha? Is he together with the Yidden or not? If his opening is only a Beis Asayim, it's a small area, so it's not so comfortable for the guy to go out, so he asks with the Yidden. Larger than that, though, it's comfortable for him to go out, so he doesn't ask with all the Yidden that he's living with. Okay. Since the Gemara brought up this inyan of karfif, even though it's not really the subject of this whole inyan here, we're speaking about the inyan of a goy living together with Yidden, but the Gemara now says a very fundamental thing about the karfif b'chlal. The whole gzeira of karfif, we had this once in the Gemara on Shabbos. Chachamim made a gzeira regarding a karfif. Today's day and age, it would be like a big park that could have a fence around the whole park, but it's a very large area that's not made for people to live there b'chlal. Because it's so big, Chachamim were geizer, it looks like a Reshus HaRabim, you shouldn't carry there. So the Gemara is going to discuss this inyan. Amar Ula, Amar Rabbi Yechanan, Karfif Yesem Beis Asayim Shlehukaf Ledira. This area, it's larger than Beis Asayim, and it wasn't made for anybody to live there. Afil Akur, Afil Kurayim. It could be as large as a Kur or Kurayim, very large area. Hazayrik Lataychay, but even the Chachamim made a gzeira that inside you're not allowed to carry more than Dalar Amas, and you treat it like a Reshus HaRabim. But if you throw something from a Reshus HaRabim into it, so then, chayiv, you're going to be chayiv min atayra, we're still machmer that it's a Reshus HaYachid. My time. And what's the reason why you're going to be chayiv if you throw into it from a Reshus HaRabim? Mechitzi, it has a wall around it. Elashim mechuser is the Yudin. No one's living there, so Chachamim will geyser that you should treat it like a carmelis, and inside you can't carry more than 4 amas. But the Gzeira of Chazal was only l'chumra, that you shouldn't be allowed to carry inside. But it wasn't l'kula that if you throw something from a Rishus HaRabim into the karfif that you'll be potter. It's still when Atayra is a Rishus HaYachid, so therefore you'll be chayiv. So that's the point of Rav Yochanan, that a karfif that they made into a carmelis was only to be machmer, not to be mekel. So on this the Gemara asks a question, Masar of Bar Chinan says in the Braise, Sela shebeyam. If you have water, an ocean, a lake, whatever, and in the middle there's a rock. So, and this rock is Gavoya Asara, it's tall 10 tfachim, V'rochav arba, and it's wide 4 tfachim. A little island in the middle. Ein metaltel in loimin teiche leyam, so you can't carry from this area into the yam, v'loimin hayam l'teiche, and not from the yam into this space. Why? Because this rock that's tall 10 tfachim and wide 4x4 is a Rishus HaYachid. What's the status of a yam? We learned in Masechta Shabbos, a carmelis. So you can't carry from it. There's a Gzeira of Chazal, you're not allowed to carry from Rishus HaYachid into a carmelis. But if it's pachas mikan, if it's less than this, if it's less than 10 tfachim high, or it's less than 4x4 tfachim, then metal, you can carry from this area, from this little island into the water, because they're both a carmelis. If it's below 10 tfachim, it's not, doesn't have the height of a Rishus HaYachid. So it's like carrying from one area of a carmelis to another area in a carmelis, as long as it's not 4 amas. You can't carry in a carmelis more than 4 amas, but you can carry from this area into the yam. Then the Braisa concludes, Ad kama, until how much could you carry? Ad beis asayim. You can carry until, if this area, this rock that is in the middle of the yam, until the size of a beis asayim. That's the conclusion of the Braisa, beis asayim. So the Gemara now asks, this last line of the Braisa, Ad kama ad beis asayim. Ahai, on which part of the Braisa is this going on? Ilei ma seifer, is this going on the seifer? What does it talk about in the seifer? Right? And the Sefer talks about an area which is below 10 tfachim. It does not have the proper height to be a Rishus HaYachid. Beis Asayim Hudim Metaltalinon. Only if it's up to the size of a Beis Asayim, then you can carry from this area into the Yam Tfei Loi. But if it's larger than a Beis Asayim, you can't. Why not? V'hamik Karmelis leKarmelis Kametaltalinon Kametaltal. If it's not 10 tfachim high, regardless of how large this area is, it's also a carmelis. So you should be able to carry from this area into the yam, regardless if it's a beis asayim or not a beis asayim. So when the Braisa says that there's a distinction in how large this area is, if it's a beis asayim or not, it goes back on the reisha. Goes back on the area which is above 10 tvachim. And what does the reisha say? V'hachi ka'amar, this is what it says. Sela shebeyam gavoya asara v'rochav dalid. If you have a sela, a rock in the middle of the yam, and it's tall 10 tfachim, and it's wide 4x4 tfachim, and it's a Rishus HaYachid, ein metalton lo miteiche liyam, v'lo min hayam l'teiche, because it's a Rishus HaYachid. V'ad kama, ad beis asayim, but only if it's the size up to a beis asayim. But if this island, ha'yesam mi beis asayim, if this island is larger than a beis asayim, metaltalin, you're allowed to carry from this place into the yam. Why? Why are you allowed to carry from this karfif into the yam? Isn't this karfif for a Rishus HaYachid? It's tall 10 tfachim and it's a Rishus HaYachid. Alma, what do you see from here? Carmelisi, that if it's larger than a Beis Asayim, it's considered to be a carmelis. And we treat it as a carmelis, not only l'chumra, that you're not allowed to carry inside the carmelis more than 4 tfachim, we treat it as a carmelis, even l'kula, that you could carry from this area into the yam, because they're both a carmelis. If so, Tiyufta de Rav Yochanan, this refutes what Rav Yochanan said. What did Rav Yochanan say? It's only considered to be a carmelis l'chumra, not l'kula. If you throw from a Rishus HaRabim into it, then it's you're going to be chayiv. Over here in this Braisa, you see that it's considered to be a carmelis, even l'kula. Tiyufta de Rav Yochanan. Okay, so we have 2 answers here. Rav says, someone that doesn't know how to answer a question from a Braisa, he asks a question from this Braisa on Rabbi Yochanan. But if you know how to read this Braisa, if you know how to explain what the Braisa is saying, you would realize it's not a question b'chlal. Why not? You're right. The Braisa and the Reisha is saying that there's a difference in this Rishus HaYachid, if it's more than a Beis Asayim or not. But v'achikama, this is how you have to read the Braisa. You first have to make a certain diuk in the Braisa, and then you have to apply what the Braisa says. What does the Braisa say? The Braisa says that if it's If it's tall 10 tfachim and it's wide 4 by 4 tfachim, so then you're not allowed to carry from this place into the Yam. Why not? Because this place is a Rosh Hashanah. You can't carry from a Rosh Hashanah into a Carmelis. What do you have to be medayik from the Braisa? Inside this area itself, you're allowed to carry more than Dalar Amas. Why? Because it's a Rosh Hashanah. Now, on this diak of ha b'saycha metaltalin, on this the Braisa adds v'ad kama. How large of an area could it be that you're allowed to carry inside? Ad Beis Hasayim. Only if it's an area of Beis Hasayim. More than Beis Hasayim, you can't carry. So it goes on this diuk of ha b'saycha metaltalin. Exactly like Rabbi Yochanan said, that the whole halacha of a karfif was to be machmer, that you can't carry more than Dalar Amas inside. But not to be mekel, that you're allowed to carry from a karfif into a karmelis. A karfif is not a karmelis. A karfif is a Rosh Hashanah. We only treat it as a karmelis, l'chumra, that you're not allowed to carry inside. Ravashi argues. No, Ravashi says la'olam areisha. Really, it is going on the reisha. The halacha over here that the Braisa said that you're allowed to carry from this place into the yam. Right? If it's more than a Beis Hasayim, so then we treat the karfif like a karmelis, and you're allowed to carry from the karfif into the karmelis. Really, it goes on the reisha. And we said before that Rabbi Yochanan says that the whole din of a karfif being like a karmelis is only l'chumra, not l'kula. The answer is hein amru ve'hein amru. Over here we're dealing with two gzeiros of Chazal, and Chazal are the ones that came and established which gzeira applies and which doesn't. In other words, what was Rabbi Yochanan talking about? Rabbi Yochanan was talking about a karfif carrying inside the karfif, which is a gzeira that Rabbanan to treat it like a karmelis, versus carrying from a Rosh Hashanah into a Karmelis. Rosh Hashanah into a Karfif, that is. From Rosh Hashanah into a Karfif. From Rosh Hashanah into a Karfif, that's Ism and Atayra. Chachamim are not going to be mevatel that Ism and Atayra. Over here, though, we're talking about two Gzeiros of Chazal. We're talking about the Gzeir of Chazal not to carry inside the Karfif, to treat it like a Karmelis. And then we're also talking about not carrying from a Karfif into a Karmelis, not into a Rosh Hashanah. Not to carry from a Karfif into a Karmelis is again a Gzeir of Chazal. Minatayra, you're allowed to carry from any Rosh Hashanah into a Karmelis. So we're dealing with two Gzeiros of Chazal, Hein Amru ve'Hein Amru. And Chachamim are the ones that establish that one Gzeira does apply and one doesn't. And the Gemara explains, Karfif Yesim Beis Hasayim Shlei Hukaf L'Dire, a Karfif that's large and people don't live there, Ei Metaltalim Bayel B'Dal Damas. So that's one Gzeira of Chazal that you're not allowed to carry inside more than Dal Damas. It looks like Rosh Hashanah, so you can't carry more than Dal Damas. And then that's another Gzeir Chazal said. Ve'hein Amru, another Gzeir Chazal said, Ei metaltlim Rosh Hashanah lekarmelis. You're not allowed to carry from Rosh Hashanah into a karmelis. That's not even talking about a karfif. In general, the whole idea that you're not allowed to carry from Rosh Hashanah into a karmelis is a Gzeir of Chazal. Beis Hasayim, so now when it comes to this karfif, if it's only a Beis Hasayim, so it's not larger than Beis Hasayim. The shari little tuli bikulei, you're allowed to carry inside it, like a regular Rosh Hashanah, as much as you want. Asri Rabbanon little tuli loimen ayam l'sayche v'loimen mitayche l'yam. So in such a case, it's a regular Rosh Hashanah, so you're not allowed to carry over here the other Gzeira of Chazal, that you're not allowed to carry from a karmelis into Rosh Hashanah applies. My time, Rosh Hashanah Gemuri, it's a regular Rosh Hashanah. Yes, sir, mi Beis Hasayim, when you have a place which is larger than a Beis Hasayim, the Asa little tuli bekulei, and you're not allowed to carry inside this karf. If we treat it like a karmelis, sharu rabbanon little tuli mitayche l'yamim and ayam l'tayche. Over here, Chachamim suspended their gzeira that you're not allowed to carry from Rosh Hashanah into a karmelis. Here, Chachamim allowed this. My time, why taka did they say this? Dilma Amri Rosh Hashanah Gemurihi. They were afraid if you're going to say that you're not allowed to carry from the karfif into a karmelis, people might think that it's a regular Rosh Hashanah, and really it's not. Really, it's an open area that Chachamim say that inside you're not allowed to carry. They don't want you to make a mistake that it's like a regular Rosh Hashanah. V'asel etel tuli b'kulei. You're going to come to carry inside of it like a regular, carry Dalet Amos inside. So therefore, Chachamim suspended their. Usually, you're not allowed to carry from Rosh Hashanah to a karmelis. Here, Chachamim decided to suspend that gzeira. Frag the Gemara u'ma'ishna. What's the difference? Chachamim wanted to make a gzeira that a karfif should be different than a regular Rosh Hashanah. They have two options of how to do that. How are you going to make a karfif different than a regular Rosh Hashanah? You could either say that you can't carry from a karfif to a karmelis. That's one way how to do it. Or you could say that you can't carry inside. What's the difference that Chachamim said that you can't carry inside, but from the karfif you could carry into the karmelis? Why did they do that? So the Gemara, toichoi shchiach, carrying inside the karfif is more common. To carry from it to outside, into a yam, to any other karmelis, that's not as shchiach. So therefore they made their gzeira for the karfif, to make the karfif different, to remind you that you shouldn't confuse it with a Rosh Hashanah to carry. They made their gzeira regarding a case which is shchiach, that you can't carry inside a karfif more than Daled Amas. But to carry from the karfif into the yam or into the karmelis, that they allowed. That they didn't make a gzeira. It's not so shchiach. Okay, this was a side point of karfif that fell into the Gemara derech agav. Now the Gemara comes back to the halacha of Erev Chatzeres. Ahu Yenuke, there was a baby that they had to make a bris for him. And what do you have to have for a bris for a baby? So you have to have hot water to be able to bathe him. This is a Gemara we learned in Shabbos. The Gemara says that then they used to bathe the baby before the bris and after the bris, and this was the only way you can make the bris. So they prepared hot water for him, but the hot water they prepared before Shabbos spilled. So what are we going to do now? They want to make the bris on Shabbos. Amalu Rabbe says, bring the hot water that I have in my house for the baby. That's in a different house. So you can carry through the chutzah and bring it from my house to the house where the baby is in. Amalei Abaye. So Abaye says to Rabbe, how are you allowed to do this? We didn't make an Erev Chatzeres. Amalei. So Rabbe says to Abaye, Nismay Chashituf. You didn't make an Erev Chatzeres. We could rely on Shituf. There's two things. There's the Erev Chatzeres and there's a Mavi. You make a Shituf in the Mavi where they all become partners in the Mavi. If you don't make an Erev Chatzeres, you could rely on the Shituf of the Mavais for the Erev for the Chatzer as well. Amalei so Abaye tells him, but Halei Shatfina. We didn't make a Shituf of the Mavi either. So we can't carry from your house into the house where the baby is. What did Rabbi say? So you know what? Tell a guy to bring that hot water for the baby. Now Abaye said, or he wanted to ask a question of Rabbi, that how are you allowed to tell a guy to do this? But so Abaye says, I wanted to ask this question, but Rav Yosef that was there didn't allow us to ask Rabbi a question. Why? The Amar Rav Yosef said, Amar Rav Kahana, the name of Rav Kahana, Ki avinu be Rav Yehuda avamalon. When we were by Rav Yehuda, he told us a very fundamental thing. When there's a psak din that's given as a heter for a question that's minatayre, for something that's deraisa, maisvinan to yufta, if there's someone that has a question on this heter, so ask your question first and clarify the heter, v'hadar of dina maisa. And only after you clarify the heter, then you can do an action to go and do it. But if a Rav gives you a heter, a psak din, a heter, regarding something which is midrabanan, even if you have a question about it, of din and maisa, first you can follow and do what he said to do, and only afterwards should you ask a question. That's by the Rabbanan, you can first, this is one of the kulas that you have by the Rabbanan more than minatayra. So therefore, Rav Yosef over here did not allow him to ask the question. We're dealing with a ism of the Rabbanan of Erev Chatzeres. So they made the bris, everything was nice and good. And then, Labasa Hachi, afterwards, Amali, Abaye says, Rav Yosef said to me, my boys lois ve'lamar. What did you want to ask, Rabba? Amri lei, so I said to him, Amri lei, so I said, I wanted to ask him, the Tanya, l'chayru, we learned in a braisa, I'll bring you a source from a braisa that you're not allowed to use a guy to bring the hot water for the baby. Why? We learned in a braisa, hazah shvus. Doing the hazah of a para aduma, to be metayir a person on Shabbos is a shvus. What's the shvus of the hazah of para aduma? That you might come to, I forgot now what the gzeira is. There's a gzeira that you're not allowed to do the hazah of a para aduma on Shabbos. So it's a ism de rabbanon. V'amira l'nochri shvus. Amira l'nochri on Shabbos is also a gzeira de rabbanon. So ma hazah shvus ve'ina deiches ha-Shabbos. The halacha b'neget para aduma, as Rashi brings from the Mishnah in Psachim. Even if you have a person that's on Erev Pesach, or it's going to be 7 days before, and you have to do the hazah for him in order to be able to be makriv the korban Pesach in time. It's not going to be Deiches Shabbos. The hazah, which is the ism de Rabbanon, is not going to be Deiches Shabbos in order to allow him to do the mitzvah of korban Pesach, ve'ene Deiches Shabbos, even for the purpose of a mitzvah. Af Amir l'Nachri, which is a shvus, ve'ene Deiches Shabbos. Amir l'Nachri is also only a ism de Rabbanon, and over here it's taka for the purpose of a mitzvah, but it shouldn't be Deiches Shabbos. That was the question that Abaye wanted to ask Rabba. Amalei, so Amarli, or the way you have to be good is this. Amarli, so Abaye says, Rav Yosef answered me, V'leishani loch. So true, you have a case where you see that we're not doicha shvus for a mitzvah, but over here, by Amira L'Nochri, this is a different kind of shvus. By Amira L'Nochri, where you're not doing the Isser, there's a difference. Leishani loch bein shvus, the is bei maise, l'shvus, the less bei maise. Is it no difference to you if there's a shvus that you're asking a guy to do something for you, and the guy is doing a ism and atayra for you, to a shvus where the guy is not doing a ism and atayra for you? The hamalei omer lenachri zil achim. Rabbe did not tell the guy, go heat up hot water, go do a malachim and atayra to heat up new hot water for the baby. The hot water was there already. All he was telling the guy to do is to bring that hot water for the bris. So it's a shvus to shvus, it's a double shvus. So in such a case, because it's a shvus to shvus over here, there's no problem. Over here it's mutter. He's telling the guy to go and do the haitzah into the chotzer, and the whole haitzah into the chotzer is only Yisem D'Rabbanan. If he would tell the guy to go and heat up the water, so he's telling the guy to do a maisa, malachim, and atayra. So that would be a problem. But if he's telling the guy to go and heat up the hot water for him, to just bring the water for him, that's Yisem D'Rabbanan, so that's not a problem.
Is it not carrying?
Huh?
What's not considered carrying?
In the chotzer. In the chotzer, it's only D'Rabbanan.
So that's one shvus.
Amir L'Nochri, the guy is doing it.
That's not, he says the Isbei Maisa.
Yeah.
That's the shvus, that's the vad.
Melacha. Maisa means, the way the Rishonim all teach it is Maisa via, Rashi doesn't say anything, but the Rishonim teach Maisa means Melacha. Is there a Melacha that you're telling the guy to do or not? Amalei Rabbi bar Avchanan la Abaye. So now, interesting, Rabbi bar Avchanan says to Abaye about this story, Mavoya, the Ispe Tre Gavri Rabbi Rabbanan. You have a Mavi that has two great people, Leila Havi be Loi Erev Loi Shittuf. There should be no Erev Chatzeris and no Shittuf Mavois. We had once before that you're supposed to make an Erev Chatzeris and Shittuf Mavois in order for people to be able to carry out on Shabbos. So here you had two great people, Rabbi and Abai, that were living, and there was nothing, no Erev and no Shittuf. How's it possible? Amalei, so Abai answered him, my Navid, what should we do? Mar, Rabbi, Lav Orche. It's not customary for him. It's not coveted for him to go around and collect the food for the Erev Chatzeris. So Rabbi doesn't make it. I'm busy learning all day. I don't have time for this. And the people of the Chatzer, they're not thinking about it. They're not careful about this to make an Erev Chatzeris. And then Abaye says, what's the big deal to make a Erev Chatzeris? You don't have to go around collect food from anybody. You have bread in your house. So designate that bread like we do today. You take a matzah and designate it for the people for an Erev Chatzeris. So he says, if I'm going to be makna, a bread that I have in a basket for the Erev Chatzeris, kivin di boilu minoi, if the people are going to come and are going to want to use it, what's Erev Chatzeris? Erev Chatzeris means that I'm being makna to everybody that this bread, this food belongs to them. But if they're going to come and ask me to eat from it, because I made it for the Erev Chatzeris, and this is going to be the only piece of bread that I have, and I won't be able to give it to them, batal shittuf, the whole Erev Chatzeris is going to be batal. So I can't afford to make the Erev Chatzeris for them without going and collecting it from them, and I don't have time. I'm sitting and learning all day. The Tanya we learned in the Braisa, if you used oil or wine for an Erev Chatzeris, and now one of the people came and wanted to take, I was included in this Erev Chatzeris, and let me have some of the oil or wine. And they don't give it to him, batla shituf. The whole thing is batal. So still, he persisted weiter. Rabbi bar Avchanan, he says to Abaye, how about you have wine in your storage, and so one revius of that wine, or even a revius of vinegar. So it's you won't even want it for yourself. So one revius, be makna in your mind for them that this is for the Erev. So Abaye answers him, no, can't do this either. Tanya, we learned in the Braisa, ein mishtatfim ba'itzer. You can't use wine that's there in your storage for an Erev Chatzeris. Why? Because you don't know which one you're going to be using. This goes back to something we had before, ein breida. You're going to be using the wine maybe the wine that you're going to go use from your storage is going to be that wine for the Erev Chatzeris. You're going to say whatever's going to be left over by the time Shabbos is up, it'll be nizbarer lemafreya, that's the one that was there for the Erev Chatzeris. No, ein breida. We don't say that it clarifies l'mafreya that was the one for the Eruv. So you can't just think in your mind that 1/4 of the wine that's there in the Eitzer is going to be used for the Eruv. The Gemara asks, "V'hatanya mishtatfin." In another brayso we learned it says that you could use 1/4 of wine that's in your Eitzer for an Eruv Chatzeris. Rav Ashi says this state of the two braysos is not a question. Like Kashya. Ha Beishame, ha Beisil. We find a machlokes between Beishame and Beisil regarding this subject, whether you say yesh breira or ein breira. When there's 1/4 amongst the whole Eitzer and that 1/4 is left over by the end of Shabbos, do I say that it's huvra, that it's clear that that's what was meant to be used for the Eruv or not? Where do we find this machlokes regarding yesh breira or ein breira according to Beishame and Beisil? Nan, we learned in the Mishnah, Hameis bebayis. You have a dead body in a house. V'loy psachim harbe. And this house has many entrances. Kulan tmeim. All of the entrances are tamei. Usually minatayre, what's the halacha of tumah? There's a tumas oil inside the house. Whatever's inside is tamei. But then there's an additional halacha l'maishem misinai. Since the mace could be brought out from any of these entrances, so therefore whatever is also outside the roof of the house itself, but it's within the mashkei of the door of the house, the doorpost of the house is also going to be tamei, because the mace goes out through there. You don't know which door it's going to go out from. So it's halach l'moshe misinai that they're all tamei. Niftach echad mehen. If one of the doors was opened up, so now you know that's where the mace is going to actually go out from. Hu tamei v'kulan tahirin. So then now the tumah is removed from all the other ones, and the susceptibility of tumah is removed of all the other ones, and only this doorway that you go out from will be tamei. Chishev lo yitziyai be'echad mehen. If a person didn't yet open up the door, but he had in mind that he's going to take out the mace from one of them. Or he had in mind that there's a certain window that's at least 4x4 tfachim wide, that's where he's going to take the mace out from. Then matzal kol psachim kulan. Because he had in mind to take out the mace from that one place, so therefore it's matzal that all the other ones, the tumah doesn't apply anymore. He's already designated in his mind one area that he's going to take out the mace from. Beishamai says, V'hu shechishev ad shelo yomas hameis. That's only if he already designated in his mind this exit for the mace before the mace died. Once the mace died, so then I say that now the halach l'moshe misinai already took effect, that all entrances become tamei. It's too late for you at this point to designate in your mind which one you're going to take it out from. B'payil in the end, the person is going to end up taking out the mace from one of them. It's too late. You don't aim breida. You're not going to say that hovra adav l'mafreya, that's where the mace is going to go out from. You had to have thought of this in advance. Beis Hillel say, af mishayamas hameis. Even after the mace died, if you think to yourself that I'm going to take him out from one doorway, and then you end out taking him out from that doorway, so now you see l'mafreya that from when he died l'chatchila, that was the doorway that he was destined to go out from. Even though l'chatchila you only had this in mind after he died, but once you have this in mind and you take him out from there, I say l'mafreya goes back l'mafreya. Beis Shammai holds it doesn't go back l'mafreya. Beis Shammai says that when you open a door and you take him out from one doorway, so then mikanu lahaba. From that point onward, I say that the other doors are not tamei. But I'm not going to say l'mafreya that your machshava goes back, that I say that that's where it was destined to come out from. So we see over here a machlokes about yesh breira or ein breira. And the same thing applies also to making an Eruv Chatzeris. When you have an Eruv Chatzeris and it's 1/4 of wine mixed in your whole storage of wine, you're not going to say, according to Beis Hillel, hovra adav l'mafreya, that it's this, again, according to Beis Shammai that is. You do not say, hovra adav l'mafreya, that it's this wine that's designated for the Eruv Chatzeris. So what's Rav Ashi basically telling Abaye, and we'll finish off at this point. He's telling him, how are you telling me that you can't make an Eruv Chatzeris with the storage of the wine? That's according to Beis Shammai. According to Beis Hillel, you could do that. So why couldn't you make an Eruv Chatzeris with the storage of the wine? The Gemara doesn't answer this. The Gemara stops at this. But Taisus over here says, Abaye obviously held a different shot in this machlokes of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. He didn't hold of this whole braisa, this whole teretz. He didn't hold of this. He held that even according to Beis Hillel, you don't say breira. And the Taisus says the sugya of breira you find many times in Shas. There's all kinds of machlokes and back and forth about it. And therefore Abaye held that he couldn't make an Eruv Chatzeris. So you see over here a person that's sitting and learning Torah all day. He has a teretz that he doesn't have to take care of the needs of the people in the chutzner, even something like making an Eruv Chatzeris. He has a teretz. I'm sitting and learning. It's not my job.